Ladies and gentlemen, Rob Jolles.
We all know we're supposed to ask questions and listen. But are our two dealers still in the room? Good. I want to talk about that. That every morning training thing, it's a fabulous idea. I haven't been there. But the great Jolles will tell you what that training, that sales training looks like, because I see it all the time, including when I started working with Toyota. I spent almost a week at Klein Tyson's Toyota on the lot watching the training, conducted some of it myself. I'm going to tell you what the training looks like. It's not their fault. It's product training. It's constant product training is what we typically see. What we do with people is we train them on product, train them on product, train them on product, tell them it's sales training, and what do you think the natural instinct is when a client walks on the lot? To ask questions and listen? No. To regurgitate the sales training they just received. For me, when I met your company, in the early 90s, whenever it was, I remember the first thing I was explained was how proud you were of, at that time, of the 7-position sale. It's still in my head. We start on that end of the dashboard and we work our way to that end of the dashboard. Huh. What happened to this part? You see, a lot of times it gets lost because it's kind of a misdirection. No. The fact of the matter is, I wanted you to go through that exercise to show you how simple it is to forget the very basic principle you learned the first day you started selling. And we're not done with it yet. How easy it is to let our guard down and think we're selling when we're talking, when we're telling. It's harder to ask questions than to speak. It's harder to ask questions and listen. Those are difficult tactics. They're exhausting frequently, especially when you know the answer to 3/4 of the questions you're asking. But we've got to let the person talk. Do you believe this? Do you believe that the more the client talks, the more they like you? Just grunt every now and then. Okay? That's all. Of course. And yet, we seem to be shooting ourselves in the foot. Well, you're getting some world-class training this week, and all you're getting from me is a healthy reminder that it's not as easy as it looks, which is why that last part of what we do today will be some mental agility to find questions, to work to listen harder, because it's difficult. Now, you want the real lesson in style because it's kind of unfair for a guy like me to say, we've got to study your style, and then basically say, forget style. No, style is important. Can anybody sell? There are questions that I'm asked when I do any media. When I'm on radio or television, every time I know I'm getting this question. Can anybody sell? And the answer is, without hesitation, absolutely, unless we screw them up. Unless, as a New York Life agent, I had 3.5 days of training. I learned about life, health, and disability. Disability, the living death. I learned about health insurance and first dollar accident benefits and pre-existing conditions clauses. I even learned a little bit of a sales script called the Live, Die, Quit story. This program will take care of you if you live, die, or quit somewhere along the way. I learned all these different pieces, and then they opened the door, shoved me out, and said, don't let us catch you in the bullpen, and 2 a week, 10 a month. Go. And if you were unlucky enough to be in front of me those first months, I was going to regurgitate everything that I learned in my sales training, which was to tell you all about insurance. And yet, when we ask questions and listen, we feel like we're working with a friend. We make the client feel more comfortable, interested. It's all there, and it's driven by that. It's embarrassing for me. I can spend 2 and 3 days, but in my gut, if people leave committed for the rest of their lives to ask questions and listen, and they got it from that training, I've done my job. Because it's harder than it looks. The real lesson, can anybody sell? Absolutely. And I'll give you a proof source. Think about the greatest salesperson that you ever knew. Okay, I got mine. Call out just the greatest salesperson who ever lived. No religious figures, please. But the greatest salesperson ever. Go. Ronald Reagan. And for the blue side, Bill Clinton. Okay, we got that evened out. I just knew there was going to be trouble, okay? But yeah, don't tell me Reagan couldn't sell, and don't tell me Clinton couldn't sell. So, Reagan, Clinton, back in the day, Iacocca, maybe it was Ziegler, I don't know. You know who I think the greatest salesperson who ever lived was? And I bet almost no one's ever even heard of the guy. The great Ben Feldman. Anybody? He wrote a couple books. Don't bother looking for them. They're not in print. They didn't sell well. He was so deathly afraid to speak in public that he did it rarely, and more than once behind a screen. He was, but let me give you some numbers. He was a New York Life guy. Now, we had 7,800 agents. He was number one. But when they ranked all the insurance agents, they looked at it as a whole. And that meant New York Life 7,800, but Prudential's 49,000, Met's 45,000, Money's 40,000. There were probably about 250,000 salespeople. And Ben Feldman was number one year after year. Let me tell you about number two. Number two sold in my first year at New York Life $52 million of insurance in 1 year. You do the commission on that, and you probably got about close to $1 million first-year commission before you wake up. The next year, you're going to get a third of that on renewals. Okay, so great year. And we're talking about 1979, okay? About $1 million. 49, 48, down the pyramid we come. We got 250,000 salespeople, but there was Ben Feldman. $151 million of insurance. Tripled anybody who got near him. Did it years before, did it years after, and I got to meet him. I got to have lunch with him. Because I was a 21-year-old kid, I got very lucky as a salesperson, had some really strong numbers. They nicknamed me in the industry, the Rocket. Put me on little magazine covers, see you at the top. And I would go around and talk a little bit, if you can conceive and believe, you can achieve. I had nothing. I had 2 a week, 10 a month. But there I got to meet this guy, and I had this image of what Ben Feldman looked like. I had him kind of a cross between like an Alec Baldwin, Rob Jolles, just a monster of a man, seething sales. And that you laugh at. Terrific. Okay. But I went to this restaurant. They sort of set this thing up. I remember coming in with my big head because I did have a year's worth of production under my belt. And I had to go to his table, mildly miffed. And there he was. And he stood up. I had a picture of him, but I couldn't really, you know how pictures are. Ben Feldman stood about 5'3" for me to tower over somebody. It's unusual. About 5'3", let's just say he was a large fella. He had hair like Larry on the Three Stooges, and he spoke with a distinct pronounced lisp, like this. Now, not quite what I had envisioned from perhaps the greatest salesperson who ever lived. Because quite frankly, I know I'm talking about numbers, but remember, I'm 22 years in this industry on my own and probably another 8 with Xerox, so I'm close to 30 years at this. I meet all the great salespeople, the ones that say they're great. Quietly, I kind of want to just tell me the numbers. The numbers will help me to figure out where we are here. Perhaps by the numbers, forget books, speeches, talk, any of that nonsense. By the numbers, maybe the greatest salesperson who ever lived without one attribute that you would associate with the greatest salesperson who ever lived. And what I learned as a 21-year-old kid, once I got over that first 10 seconds of listening to him was, oh my goodness, there's style and there's technique. They're completely different. Too often after we get done pounding product in your head, we have somebody saying, now here's what you're going to do, kid. And we're getting all sorts of style from somebody. And now we wonder why people fail early in the business. I'm probably going to preach back product, thinking I've been sales trained, and I'm going to emulate a style that is not my own while I'm doing it. And that's why we have so much trouble coming out of the gate. Because what Ben Feldman taught us is there is no style that won't work. There are techniques that make sense, so everything that I do, anything that I work with you on, anything that you read from me, should not be style related. You are allowed to keep saying, okay, that's an East Coast guy, he's kind of a wacky guy, I'm not quite that way. How do I do what this guy just taught me technique-wise and make it feel like me? And the answer is, Your style will be just fine, but let's put some good, solid processes behind it. I wrote about Ben Feldman in 2 of my books. That was a very meaningful moment in my life, became more meaningful as I got older, and I called him in both books the best salesman ever. And when he passed away a few years ago, Selling Magazine said the same thing. Best salesman ever. Very kind picture from the 60s, but I don't know if you can see some of the numbers here. $1.6 billion of insurance sold. One of my favorite, do we have anybody in here who previously sold life insurance? Don't be ashamed, my insurance partners. Look at that. I'm not talking. Okay, the fact of the matter is, when I sold, to sell about couple million in the year, got shown the $1 Million Round Table, it was that first level of success. I don't want to obsess on Ben Feldman's numbers, but you know one of my favorite? Ben Feldman had a string of selling $1 million of insurance a month that lasted over 16 years. That's impressive. So it wasn't just once or twice, it was on and on and on. And Ben Feldman is a guy that we should all remember. I personally believe. People have asked me, well, does he follow this tactic? I've done a lot of reading about him. I was a kid, I didn't know what to ask him. But I will tell you that one of my favorite quotes of his was, most difficult part of the sale is the interview, but the most difficult part of the interview are the disturbing questions. More foreshadowing from Jolles. That's where we've got to go.